Sometimes it seems like the silence between you is simply fatigue, but Jung would say otherwise. It's the shadow stirring beneath your skin. What you're not saying doesn't disappear. It pulsates like a hidden letter long overdue to be opened. You feel this tension, but you pretend nothing is happening, and yet it is already happening. Sometimes you wake up and don't understand why someone who seems so far away is nearby. Not kilometers, but internal walls. And you built these walls yourself, laying bricks of resentment, shame, and fear of rejection. With each silence, they grew higher. And now you both live in your own fortresses, surrounded by feelings that neither of you dares name. The strangest thing is the feeling that you don't even remember how it all began. A trifle, a trigger, an unfortunate phrase, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you left it inside. Unsaid words are like poison, slow but precise. It doesn't destroy loudly, it works quietly but without error. You hid your irritation, you didn't want to appear weak. You thought that remaining silent would preserve the peace. But in a relationship, silence isn't peace. It's a frozen storm. And one day the ice cracks, painfully, unexpectedly, always at the wrong time. There are things we hide even from ourselves, and all of them eventually manifest in reactions. You lash out not at what's happening now, but at the pain that's long festered within. Your partner sees only a flash, but the true fire is deeper. Jung called it a confrontation with one's own shadow. And every time we wonder, how did it happen that the person closest to you becomes an enemy? The truth is, he's not the enemy. You've simply been battling yourself for too long, and every battle has collateral damage. It hits those you didn't mean to hurt, especially those you love. Sometimes a single honest confession is enough to relieve the tension that's been building for years, but you're afraid the truth will ruin the relationship. And you don't notice that it's precisely the lack of it that's destroying it. Relationships aren't destroyed by the truth. They're destroyed by silence, filled with guesswork. You wait for the right moment, a gentler day, a more suitable mood, but such moments never come. Internal conflicts don't disappear on schedule, and the longer you delay, the greater the distance. It's like sitting in a sinking boat and pretending the water inside is just a reflection of the sky. When you finally dare to speak, your voice trembles, because you're not opening your mouth, you're opening the door to your vulnerability. And it's in that moment that an opportunity appears. Where once there was a shadow, light appears. Where the hidden has controlled you, choice emerges. And you suddenly understand, what you were so afraid to voice wasn't destruction but healing. It was precisely what you were hiding that was destroying you, and maybe the relationship isn't ruined. It was simply waiting for you to stop playing defense, for you to allow yourself to be seen, for you to stop hiding what's been clamoring to be revealed. And this honesty isn't the end, it's the beginning. There are moments when you sit across from each other and realize it's too late to speak, but remaining silent is even worse. The air thickens as if before a storm, and you feel like any sentence could be the last straw. But it's precisely in these moments that the truth rings especially clear, because it doesn't come from the mind, it comes from deep within, from that quiet inner space you've ignored for so long. And suddenly, even your eyes begin to speak for you. You speak words you've been embarrassed to. You admit your mistakes without trying to justify them. And this fragility, this nakedness, isn't weakness but a new form of strength. After all, strength isn't about maintaining a mask. Strength is letting the mask fall. Jung said that facing your own shadow makes us whole. And it's on evenings like these that you first understand that relationships aren't about perfection. They're about the courage to be real. And it's strange how much changes when you stop hiding. Even your breathing deepens. Even the pauses become warmer. Where there were once guesses, clarity emerges. Where there was resentment, there's room for touch. It's as if you've both finally emerged from the darkness, squinting in the light, yet still together. Your partner listens to you differently, more attentively, more calmly, because the truth always creates the effect of ground beneath your feet. You're both standing on something real, not the shifting sand of omissions. And on this foundation, you can build not fear, not suspicion, but trust. Quiet, warm living. But the most amazing thing is that you notice that everything you've been hiding wasn't actually so scary. It was scarier to keep it inside. It was scarier to pretend to be stronger than you are. Because a constant game of control is a constant loss of self. And the more you hid, the more you lost the feeling of intimacy. Now it feels like for the first time in a long time, you're looking at someone important to you, not through the lens of expectations, but as they are. Not perfect, but alive. And they see you, the real you, not hidden behind words, not protected by walls. And there's something almost sacred about that. You begin to notice the little things. A look that once seemed cold is now simply tired. A word that sounded stinging turns out to be spoken out of anxiety. You see not just a reaction, you see the reason. And this understanding changes everything. Because true intimacy happens not in a moment of passion, but in a moment of understanding someone else's pain. And then comes silence, but a different kind. Not heavy, not prickly, but a silence in which you can breathe, in which you can be close without even saying a word, in which there is no tension, only presence. And you understand this silence is not an enemy. It is a space in which relationships learn to live again. You're no longer afraid of triggers. You're not afraid of honesty, because you've learned the most destructive secrets are the ones that remain unacknowledged. And the strongest relationships are the ones that allow for weakness. Not a picture-perfect picture, but the real, sometimes painful but living truth. And at some point you ask yourself, why did I keep silent for so long? Why was I afraid to show that I was hurt? Why did I think my partner would turn away? And the answer is simple. You underestimated the power of love, real love. The kind that's built not on pretty words but on open hearts. And now that you've finally allowed yourself to speak, the relationship has stopped crumbling. It's begun to breathe, and you along with it. Sometimes, after being honest, there's a strange aftertaste, like dropping a heavy backpack but still trying to keep your shoulders tense out of inertia. The habit of hiding your feelings doesn't disappear right away. It reverberates in your gestures, your pauses, your choice of words. But now you notice it, and everything you notice no longer controls you from the shadows. You find yourself inventing fewer scenarios, reading less between the lines, making fewer guesses that used to turn love into a labyrinth. Now every phrase sounds clearer, every movement more open. And instead of the internal dialogue, what did he mean? A living question emerges. Are you okay? And the answer is not defensiveness, but honesty. A new energy appears in the relationship. Not a surge of passion, but a quiet maturity. A warm presence that requires no masks. It's as if you've stopped struggling for a role and become yourself for the first time. This is the moment Jung wrote about. Meeting the shadow makes a person more whole, and this integrity is no less attractive than romance. Sometimes you still stumble, old habits return, the desire to remain silent tightens your throat. But now you have the skill of speaking up, even when it's difficult. And there's someone who has learned to listen, even when it hurts. These two qualities completely change the dynamic. Before, conflict turned into an explosion. Now it turns into understanding. You notice that your reactions are softening. It's as if there's no longer that hidden war inside that used to cause irritation out of nowhere. When there's less hidden in the soul, there are fewer triggers. Pain doesn't simmer because it has a place to go, and warmth enters there too. For the first time in a long time, you feel safe. So much so that even the pauses between messages don't cause anxiety. So much so that you no longer look for hidden meaning where there is none. So much so that you can simply be there, without fear of losing. And that's the strangest thing. The less fear, the stronger the connection. You look at the person next to you and understand. They too were hiding. They too were afraid. They too lived in their shadows. And now that you've opened up, their fragility has been revealed. And you hold it carefully like a glass vessel. Because you know everyone has their own cracks, their own wounds, their own unclosed chapters. But it's precisely the acknowledgement of these wounds that allows relationships to deepen. And a moment comes when you can both quietly smile at what almost destroyed you, because now you understand the problem wasn't incompatibility, not we're different, not personalities, but that you lived too long at the distance of your inner truths. And as soon as you took a step closer, the space between you began to disappear. The past no longer hangs over you like a shadow. It becomes history, not a threat. You can talk about it calmly, without pain, without reproach, because the present has ceased to be fragile. It has become stable, gentle, real. And one evening, you suddenly realize the relationship didn't crumble. Only the walls you built within yourself were crumbling. And when those walls finally fell, you saw there was a person there all along who hadn't left, who had been waiting for you to stop hiding, for you to allow yourself to be real, for you to risk telling the truth, which became your salvation. And at that moment, you quietly exhale, because you know what comes next will be different, more honest, deeper, more alive. Now you notice how different your conversations sound. They're less rushed, less defensive, less of those quick, barbed replies you used to cover up the pain. Your words have become warmer, slower, more deliberate. It's as if a new rhythm has struck between you, calm, mature, honest. The rhythm of people who are no longer afraid to be heard for who they are. Sometimes the past still knocks on the door. Old reactions rise up like a wave of waves, but now you're not afraid. You recognize them as familiar shadows that no longer hold power. You speak of them directly. I felt this just now. I felt pain here. And your partner hears you not as an accusation, but as trust. You cease to be the enemy of your own fears. For the first time, you feel that you don't need to maintain a relationship through willpower. It begins to hold itself together through transparency, through attention, through a quiet reciprocity that grows without orders. It's as if you're transplanting love from the stony soil of expectations to the living soil of honesty. And it grows, not quickly but surely. Small rituals emerge, a cup of tea in the evening, a text saying, "How are you?" Not out of concern, but out of care. Even just being there becomes an event. And you suddenly notice that simple moments are the most healing, because there's no drama, no games, no masks. There are only two people who have chosen to no longer hide anything important from each other. Sometimes you think back to that day when you almost lost everything, and each time you're overcome with a strange gratitude, as if that very crack opened the way to the light. Because until the old breaks, the new doesn't appear. And those destructions you feared turned out to be a door, to another depth, to another attempt, to another version of the two of you. In the evenings, you find yourself no longer checking, no longer doubting, no longer stressing over trivial matters. Your body has relaxed. Your soul has stopped expecting a blow. You've begun to trust, not because you've been convinced, but because your own truth has finally come uncontained, and you no longer live under siege. Your partner has changed too. They've begun to speak more boldly. They've stopped fearing your reaction. They've stopped guessing your emotions and started asking directly. And you realize frankness is contagious. It's like a light that lights another light. And suddenly you both become more honest, not only with each other, but with yourselves. And then the day comes when you argue again. But this isn't the kind of argument that destroys. It's a conversation between two mature souls. There's emotion, but no destruction. There's disagreement, but no alienation. And you're settling not into loneliness, but into understanding. Because you've learned to speak not to win, but to be heard. And in the silence after this argument, you suddenly notice how much love remains between you. It didn't vanish in the difficulties. On the contrary, it grew through them. It became denser, deeper, more real. No longer fragile, unaffected by mood. It's like a tree that has taken root and no longer sways with every wind inside you. And then you understand the most important thing. Relationships aren't destroyed by mistakes, conflicts, or weaknesses. They're destroyed by secrets hidden from those who should be there. But when there are no more secrets, there's space. Space to breathe, to choose. For love that doesn't need protection because it grows from the truth, and the truth is never destructive. Only its absence destroys. and you see each other differently, as people who have walked through their shadows and emerged into the light together. Now you increasingly notice that intimacy isn't just touching or words, it's the feeling of being seen, the real you, without filters, without trying to be convenient, without inner tension. And it's strangely liberating. After all, for so long you felt that love had to be earned. And now you suddenly understand, it doesn't need to be held by force. It lies where the truth lies. Sometimes in the evenings, you sit in silence and remember how you used to be afraid to open up, how you kept inside what ate you up from the inside, how you played the role of the strong, the unfeeling, the normal. And it almost becomes funny how much energy you spent on a mask that eventually cracked. But you're grateful for this crack. It became an entry point to something greater. Now, instead of hidden tension, there's curiosity between you. You explore each other anew, as if meeting each other for the first time. But this new first acquaintance is much deeper than before, because now you see not only qualities but also wounds, not only habits but also the reasons behind them. And the more you see, the more respect is born within. The most amazing thing is how your reactions to small things change. Where you would have withdrawn before, you now speak up. Where you would have been offended before, you ask. Where you once created a tragedy, you see only a signal. And each such moment feels like a small victory over your own shadow, the one that previously controlled you silently. Sometimes you catch yourself believing in a future together for the first time in a long time. It no longer seems fragile. It has ceased to be something conditional, dependent on 1,000 little details. You feel that if you have mastered what was inside, everything else is much easier to cope with. External problems no longer seem so enormous when internal ones are no longer hidden. You notice you've stopped being afraid of losing love, because you can only lose what's held together by fear and games. What's held together by honesty is difficult to lose. It doesn't disappear suddenly. It warns, it speaks, it heals. And for the first time in a long time, you feel stability, not external but internal. And one day, looking at the person next to you, you feel not just love, you feel respect for their fragility, for their openness, for the fact that they too have overcome their fears to be genuine with you. And this respect creates a depth that cannot be built otherwise. It doesn't appear in ideal relationships. It appears in honest ones. You understand, what you hid wasn't your protection, it was your prison, and you yourself held the key to it. But when you decided to open the door, there was no catastrophe outside. There was a person waiting for you to stop hiding, for you to stop being afraid, for you to become accessible. Now you live differently, more consciously, more gently. You see each other not as perfection, but as a journey. And this journey no longer frightens you. Because you know, any difficulties can be overcome if you don't hide what hurts. Any fears can be healed if you have someone to show them to. Any distance can be shortened if you honestly admit what created it. And then one day you quietly understand, truth doesn't destroy relationships. Vulnerability doesn't destroy them. Weakness doesn't destroy them. Only silence, where shadows accumulate, destroys. But when shadows become words, they cease to be a threat. And then love ceases to be an illusion and becomes something real, mature, alive. And you finally allow yourself what you were so afraid of, being open. Because it was in this openness that you found not loss but salvation. Not the end, but a new level of intimacy where relationships don't need to be held back. They simply need to be lived together. Write in the comments, any difficulties can be overcome if you don't hide what hurts. Support the channel with likes and subscriptions so you don't miss new videos. Thanks for watching.